Before we get started with the show, I just want to take a moment and thank you for tuning in to the I Find It Interesting podcast. There are a lot of shows out there, hundreds of thousands, and your time is valuable. Your interest and your attention is greatly appreciated. Now, as a quick heads up about today's interview with Reema Zaman, it's worth mentioning that some mature topics are discussed, so you might not want to be listening to this at full volume with your kids in the car. Use your discretion. Now, on to the show. Welcome to the podcast, and welcome to the very first episode of the I Find It Interesting podcast. I'm your host, Matt Monroe, and in the studio today, which actually is her living room, it's kind of bare right now, is Reema Zaman. Reema is an actress, an artist, a public speaker, a playwright, and author of the phenomenal, and I don't use this word lightly, phenomenal new memoir, I Am Yours. Her work has been featured in such publications as The Guardian, The Rumpus, Shape, Vita, The Huffington Post, and The New York Times. She's also a recipient of 2018's Oregon Literary Arts Writer of Color Fellowship, and she has just been featured in Brown Girl magazine as the, quote, Brown Girl of the Month. Most important, she's one of the most interesting people I've ever met in my life, with an absolutely fascinating story and stories to tell about her own life. And Reema, welcome to the inaugural episode of the I Find It Interesting podcast.
Thank you so much, Matt. I'm so honored to be here.
So I wanted to have you as the first guest on the podcast for a variety of reasons. One, your life story is more than just interesting, it's unique and fascinating. Two, you have a book coming out, a memoir. It's being released today, and I want to give listeners a heads up about the book along with some excerpts. And three, I really want to help get the word out simply about you. So
Thank you.
Let's start with a question I asked you when we first met about 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. We actually met in a bar, thanks to Srini Rao.
Yes.
I said, basically, Reema, what's your story?
And I replied, Matt, I am from Bangladesh. I was born there in 1983. And my parents and I, we moved to Hawaii when I was 2 years old. And then when I was 6 years old, my family, my parents, myself, and my brother, he was born in Hawaii. We moved to Thailand. And in Thailand, my sister was born, and our family was complete. And I grew up in Thailand. I graduated from high school there when I was 18. And I immigrated to the States by myself that year to study in Skidmore College. And I was a women's studies and theater double major. And I chose those two areas of studies because my entire life, growing up in the cultures I did, I grew hyper aware from a very young age of the systemic racism and sexism that plague our world. And I started going through experiences where I felt the silencing of my own voice because I was a girl, and I witnessed the silencing of the voices of the women and girls around me. And it fueled my fire and conviction that I had to grow up and dedicate my life to being a voice for the stories and souls that have been historically silenced. And that's why I came to the States, and that's why I knew from age 15 that I would dedicate my life to being an artist of some sort, because art gives voice to what would otherwise remain silent. And for me, it has just been a matter of, figuring out which medium of art best suits the stories I wish to tell and the message and legacy I wish to have in this world. And for a long time, I was an actress and a model in New York City from the time I was 22 to 29. And initially, it felt like the most natural fit because as an actor, you're hired for stories that, that hopefully will vehicle empowering messages in the world. But I soon realized that, well, as an actress, I had very little say over whatever message I was being used to ambassador. And in a way, after a while, it felt incredibly constricting because as an actress, especially as an actress of color, I was very limited to what I was able to say based on the words that were assigned to me. And more often than not, I was being sent out to audition for roles, and I was being hired for roles that only perpetuated the very stereotypes I wanted my life to challenge. And I realized when I was 29 that that was no longer acceptable for me. And that for me to truly be a voice for the messages I want to put into the world, I had to go about creating that role for myself. And I write in I Am Yours that when the world fails to give you the role or opportunity or love that you desire to feel truly fulfilled, go out and create that role, create that love, create that relationship, create that landscape, be the change that you so desperately seek in the landscape. And so that's what I did. I left New York on a one-way ticket. I left the acting industry and modeling industry, and I came to Portland because my mother and my stepdad live here, and I made a deal with them. I asked them if I could live with them for a year and a bit, and to write this one particular book that I could hear in my head. It came to me as a fully conceived idea, and I knew that there was this one particular memoir I wanted to write, and it would satisfy the kind of work I feel I was born to do here, and so I did that, and here we are. It's being published today, and it's been a remarkable journey of self-reclamation. It's been a remarkable journey of healing the traumas I had gone through as a child and a young adult and a teenager. And it also has been an incredibly humbling journey of using my voice to ignite the voices of others.
I want to go back in time, and I want to return to Bangladesh.
Yes.
You stood out from the other girls, and you stood out from your family.
I did.
Talk about that.
Well, I think I stood out physically as well as emotionally or culturally, I guess. Physically, because of the ancestry on my mother's side as well as my father's side, I'm told repeatedly almost every day by someone that I don't look traditionally Bangladeshi. So yes, we have that to contend with. But the bigger difference I have always been conscious of and made conscious of is that emotionally, and I haven't been culturally Bangladeshi in the sense that I speak truth to power. I am very open and outspoken about injustice, especially injustices committed against girls and women. And traditional Bangladeshi culture definitely creates and thrives upon the culture of silence and the culture of shame and misogyny. So my very presence threatens all of that and is, of course, a very stark difference of the status quo.
There's a moment in the book where you're told boys will be boys.
Yes.
And it's in reference to, I believe, a cousin of yours?
Yes. When I was 11 years old, a cousin, 20 years my senior, he tried to molest me. And I had been warned about him from other relatives in my family. And I also instinctively felt, I instinctively knew from the time I was 6 years old to stay away from him. And so thankfully I was able to get away, and then I reported him, and I was told boys will be boys and that this happens especially between cousins. And in that moment, a few things occurred. I realized that predators exist and continue to exist because there is this culture of perpetuated silencing of girls' and women's voices, of children's voices, really. And the other thing that happened was I made that vow that if the people around me were unable or unwilling to speak, then I would grow up and be a voice for those who have been silenced.
You know, the theme, boys will be boys, and also men will be men.
Right.
It reoccurs consistently through the book.
Consistently. Mm-hmm.
And that's not Bengali culture, that's not Thai culture, that's all cultures.
It's globe spanning. It's globe spanning misogyny, and also it's globe spanning complicity. Because anytime those phrases are used, it's always used in a dismissive way toward, a girl or a woman daring to speak out about some sort of injustice that has happened toward her. And in the face of her speaking her truth, her audacity that she's doing so, people will try to bat aside her quote unquote accusations or complaints by saying, well, boys will be boys or men will be men, as though that exonerates the crime, as though that exonerates the acts of disrespect and degradation that women and girls are ritually subjected to every single day. I mean, and it's not men or complicit men who say this to bat aside women and girls. I receive a lot of those comments, and I continue to daily, from women who are also complicit in abuse culture and the culture of degradation against women and girls. And what I have realized is that anytime I receive one of these, negative, what's been amazing is, thus far, I'm Yours hasn't received a single negative review, but I do receive trollish comments. And I've been able to analyze and study these comments. And I find them fascinating because I am, after all, I write about the human condition. So I study all of this. And what I've realized is that there's three kinds of negative comments that I receive. It's all very gendered. They come from women, they come from men, and they come from institutions. And all three, it's about maintaining and protecting the culture of silence, because it is only through the culture of silence that patriarchy can thrive, right? And so how dare I speak against this? And every time I receive any kind of negative trollish comment, I can see so clearly that it's actually a confessional. It's a confessional of that person's internalized shame, that person's internalized racism or misogyny. It's also a projection of their fears and their insecurities. And my very presence, the very presence of my voice, it threatens the glass house in which they live.
So, there's certainly elements of learned helplessness that people pick up.
Right.
And early in the book, you talked about, you have this phrase, I love this. Everywhere I look, everywhere I go, being female means a degree of powerlessness. And powerlessness, certainly it can be hammered into you by a culture,
right?
But it can also be taught. It can also be accepted. It
Right.
can also be learned.
Exactly. And one of the main reasons I wanted to write I Am Yours was to show this subtle and systemic learned powerlessness, and how it is so easy for any woman to succumb to that. Because one of the things, so I was in an emotionally abusive marriage in my mid-20s, and one of the things I recognized in myself was the self-loathing narrative I started subjecting myself to, saying, how could I be so stupid? Why didn't I see all these things? How could I have fallen for that? Which I am not alone in that. So many people, especially women, we will berate ourselves for being quote unquote so stupid to succumb to those kind of forces. And
I'm going to stop you because society will also berate you for being so smart.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. There you go. And so there is this, stigma and shame around being in any kind of, toxic relationship. And I started unpacking that through writing for myself. I was writing all of these essays while I was in that marriage. And then when I left, when he and I separated, I continued to write just to unpack what had gone on. How did that situation come to be? How did I come to be the woman I was? Because here I was, a card-carrying feminist, a women's studies major for heaven's sake, and I found myself in a toxic cage of a marriage. And it was while I was investigating that, I realized actually this begins from a young age. And it's like you said, it's society, so many characters, so many experiences, so many forces begin to layer. And it's so simple to learn voicelessness, to be silenced systemically by so many elements in a girl's life, in a woman's life. And that's why, and once I traced all of that, so my acting background, to prepare for a role, the first thing I would do for any character was I would make a timeline of the formative experiences that woman went through in her childhood, teenagehood, young adulthood. And this timeline wouldn't be in the actual play, but it would inform the way I would portray her.
Right, it was a foundation.
It was the foundation and backstory of how a human being becomes. And so I did that for myself. And I went through age by age to see how I became this person who was capable of being silent. And I realized that was the story. That, age 3, this happened. Age 4, this happened. Age 11, this happened. 18, 23, 24, all the way to age 29. And I realized this subtle yet clear silencing of a woman's voice. It's so easy for any of us to go through that. And I wrote this timeline, and on the bottom of that timeline, I wrote, I will no longer be spliced. I need to align. Because one of the things I did realize is that if you have had wound upon wound layered upon you, it will result in the splicing between the authentic self and the inner wounded child. And for my entire life, I felt this splicing, this fracturing between the person I know, the person I am when I can be my most intelligent, mature self, and then the person I can be when I'm my own berating self, which is the voice of the inner wounded child who says, how could you have found yourself in that position? You don't deserve, if you are so stupid to be in a toxic relationship, perhaps you don't deserve anything better. And those are the things I would tell myself. And so once I had this timeline written out of the silencing of a girl and the desire to claim a woman's voice, I realized that's the axis upon which a woman's life swings. And that was the timeline and the outline for a larger book. And I realized that was the book I was born to write.
I'm going to go back in time quite a bit here.
Okay.
So you kept, to give a little lead into the book, you kept falling into uncomfortable relationships, abusive relationships.
Right.
Do you think there is comfort to be found in the uncomfortable?
I think so, because it is, if we are modeled or taught that we deserve disrespect and pain from a young age, that becomes our norm. That becomes, if the world continually hurts you, you start to believe that is all you deserve. It becomes your identity. So I kept on recreating that identity. I kept on recreating that cycle because I inherited it. And it's actually so comfortable to stay inside of that known, that known normality, and to break any kind of cycle, to break any kind of habit, to break any kind of identity requires enormous work.
You had a family member tell you, you think you're so smart, it's going to be hard for a man to love you.
Yes, I've heard that numerous times, and I know numerous women who have heard that, because how dare we speak? If you speak, you shake things up, and you start to poke holes in the larger architecture that we're supposed to be loyal to.
I want to shift topics just a little bit here.
Right.
I want to move a little forward in the timeline of the book. You established a relationship with a man who is a self-proclaimed alpha male.
Yes.
You learned a lot about society and the hierarchy of society. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't necessarily mean the hierarchy of men and women. I mean the hierarchy of the alpha male, the
Mm-hmm.
alpha woman, the beta, the
Right.
gamma, the epsilon, the theta.
Exactly.
Exactly. Talk about that. Let's explore that concept.
Yes, the higher echelons of society and power and corrupt power. And yeah, so that was a relationship I started after my ex-husband and I separated. So I was 28 when I met this man, this character that you bring up. And so in the book, I don't name anyone, nor do I give them pseudonyms. I purposefully there's two relationships that I write about in the book with men, two romantic relationships, and I call them Peter Pan and the Prince. And I use these archetypes because it seems fitting, and also yeah. Anyway, you'll see when you read the book. They're fitting archetypes, they're fitting names. And the Prince, I learned a lot about how ambition can be so blinding, even if someone starts off with really good intentions to serve, society, to serve the human race, how, toxic power corrupts.
What do you think most people don't know about power but is absolutely true?
Oh, that's fascinating. If you love power too enthusiastically, regardless of what kind of power that is, whether it's beauty, wealth, status, fame, that power will become your prison.
Well, power takes many forms.
Mm-hmm.
Early in the book, you write, "There is nothing a boy hates as much as an ugly, smart girl."
Mm.
But later on, you write, "I take it back. There is something a boy hates as much as an ugly, smart girl, a beautiful, smart girl."
Yes.
Beauty is power.
Beauty is power. And it was definitely... So I grew up very bullied as a child. And when I was 15, I'd gone through, some traumas in my family, and then also the school bullying. When I was 15, I just said, I'm done. And I decided to pursue beauty the way a shark attacks flesh. And I wanted to feel power. I wanted to feel powerful in some way or shape or form. And especially in, global culture, beauty is positioned as the most powerful tool a girl can aspire towards having. And I went through that journey that a lot of girls go down, which is thinking, it will be my protection. It will be the thing that gives me a foothold and a sense of belonging and identity and love in this world. But beauty is only skin deep, and so is any kind of protection or love you gain through beauty and only beauty itself. And I learned also, again, how if you love a power too enthusiastically, it can become your prison. Because lo and behold, my devourous hunger for beauty, for physical beauty, led me down the path of anorexia. And I battled anorexia from age 15 to age 29 because I had this single-minded obsession to become perfect, because I believed that perfection, physical perfection, would protect me from the pain of life. And that is not true, because beauty is not protection, it's not immortality, it isn't legacy, and it certainly isn't invulnerability. Pain will still find you. And to create true meaning and place in the world, we have to aspire to something other than the physical, the material, the possessive.
Do you think you're a perfectionist on your own, though?
In many ways, I think I was born this way.
Okay.
And then also, it's biological, it's nature and nurture. Because I do know that in many ways, my work ethic and my drive, which are connected to perfectionism, it is connected. It's all part of the way I have responded to trauma. And I have been that young girl who's trying to insulate herself and trying to make up for the pain she was subjected to. And so once I really unpacked that, I realized that there is such a difference between work ethic and ambition and punishing perfectionism. There's such a difference between discipline, healthy discipline, and punishing perfectionism to the point of self-loathing or self-harm, which is definitely a path I know very well. And writing I Am Yours helped me really differentiate that and make that important and, in my case, life-giving distinction that I can definitely aspire for excellence in my art, but not at the cost of my own life, emotionally, spiritually, and physically.
Let's talk about your writing process. First of all, describe the room we're in right now. Describe your artist loft.
My artist loft. So so this is going to be published on February 5th. So I will have left this apartment by then. I'm moving out on January 31st, and I've actually been in this apartment since, I moved into this place in Valentine's Day, 2015. And this has been my sanctuary. It's a small 1-bedroom apartment. It doesn't feel very small to me because I came from New York, so it feels ginormous. And it's full of light, and I write about it in I Am Yours, where it's the first place in my entire life where my name has been on the lease, and that has meant so much to me. It is the first place that has been mine and only mine. And to those kind people who are listening and who will read the book, you will see how finding home and finding security has been such a huge hope and driving desire in my life. So the moment I moved into this safe space, it felt like I could breathe. And not only could I breathe, but I could actually grow. And it isn't an accident that I Am Yours went through its final drafts in this sanctuary of a space. Human beings, it's like, how goldfishes, they will grow to the size of the bowl you give them. And we humans are identical. We will grow to the size of the parameters we allow ourselves, emotional parameters, creative parameters. It's not physical. It's about allowing ourselves the space to fill into our bravest, boldest voice.
Do you remember the first passage you wrote in the book?
I do. It was that timeline I was speaking of, and it's page 241 in the book, and it is. I'm happy to read it if you'd like. Actually, I'll read from 238. There's a small section that leads into this rather well. Time elapses. The next night we have sex. I realize he has left. I feel it in his touch. Moreover, I can feel he has been with someone else. Wrapped in our vortex, I feel a cold stillness spread through me like a river lost, trying to find its way to an ocean it doesn't know. Perhaps women feel this more acutely for the way our bodies are shaped to receive and form to a man's. As we feel your touch change from sweet to bitter, caring to cold or worse, apathetic, we morph as well. We change from your cradle to your receptacle, your garden to your wasteland, an area bereft of value, meaning, or beauty, a land deemed ruined, barren of interest, where waste is deposited and things go to die. He has been with someone else, and rather recently. She exists vividly in the air. I don't smell her. I don't find traces of lipstick on a collar. She lives in his distance, hovering the way a foreshadow floats between two people. I move horizontally, back and forth, sandwiched between him and the bed, kneaded like dough as he burrows into me. My head is turned to the left. His chin with its light stubble grinds into my forehead. In the morning, I'll have to hold an aspirin moistened with water against the raw spot. It will soothe the red. My eyes memorize the titles of books and boxes along the walls. I fill with the boredom from being here again, tired of the story that folds back unto itself. I'm weary of being insipid to a man. I loathe myself for yet again choosing someone who makes me feel this way. I recover my clothes off the floor like Gretel retrieving crumbs to find her way home. I layer my layers, an unwanted object covering itself. In my coat, at the door, I turn around. Are you happy? Sorrow keeps me from voicing the question our bodies have answered. Yes, he says. I'm happy. How am I here? The years are stacking. I am 11. Papa says boys will be boys. It happens. I am 18. The tag on my school uniform collar grates the back of my neck like a vegetable peeler strips an unpleasing outer layer. The principal interrogates me. Despite innocence, I feel defensive, guilty for being a girl. The seat of the office chair is so high my feet don't touch the ground. Perhaps the seat is cranked high because it's a way to enforce authority and procure obedience. My legs swing any time I speak, words I've rehearsed in front of the mirror. When I have purged all details, he says, "Thank you for remaining quiet." I don't remember offering my silence. It is assumed. I return to class. He smiles in a way reserved for me. I hate him. I stay until the bell rings. I leave and return when I'm supposed to, a pendulum on her designated course. My school does nothing. My parents do nothing. At night, I run until my mind detaches from my body. It's the only thing that feels good. I am 23. I am fortunate my rape is quick and relatively painless. He is economical with time, force, and me. I am 24. A Saturday afternoon, I'm on my shift. He corners me, cups my face in his clammy mitt, and says, "You're so pretty. I could eat you up." I negotiate an apology, but that is all. I'm a stain. He is status, wealth, and fame personified. I am 27. We don't need to belabor the details. You were there, my love. I am 28. Again, you've been here with me. Things felt wonderful until they weren't. Or perhaps they weren't wonderful. Perhaps I'm cognizant of some pieces while ignorant of others. Perhaps I've grown to believe this is simply how things are, and I'm continuing a tale I've inherited as a girl in this world. I am 18, 28, 38, and 8. I see another self on the subway, looking like a wad of gum hastily hidden underneath a desk. Gray, hardened, disposed, commonplace. Her eyes meet mine as we try to maintain our balance. I wonder who, where, when. Was she thrown against a wall, into a corner, on the bed, on the ground, or in an alley as her dignity was stolen, her value denied? Were the insults and intimidation thrown at school, over dinner, online, or at work? I can't say, but I recognize the result, as familiar as Mama's perfume. A look that comes from indignity, inflicted in any form. It is eyes sapped of light, a spirit withered, a voice silenced. I am 18, 20, 24, 25, 27, 28. The times I've said yes when part of me screamed no. Something is amiss. I don't feel lost, broken-hearted, or disheartened. I know this is my journey to walk. But what haven't I connected? What dragon have I yet to slay? Me. I am 29. I was raised by a bully. I married a bully. And left unchecked, I become my biggest bully. I absorb the venom around me. I find ways to help it course my veins. Here I am, living a story of punishment and longing to find instead a book that is a clear line of love. My love, I think I've sorted our origins. Within me live two voices, spliced since a toddler. One is calm, loving, and kind, and the other exceptionally destructive. This latter voice declares I'm inadequate, insignificant, insufficient, inept, fat, ugly. It says, listen to him, follow him. It says, you worthless thing, what could you possibly do but hawk your physical wares? It says, you worthless thing, what could you possibly do but hawk your physical wares? The first voice is you, my imaginary best friend from childhood, whom I never released, while the second is my inner lonely child. It answers to many names, one being anorexia. For if control is my father and beauty my mother, anorexia is their offspring. You and the wounded child exist by connection. There's a saying I've carried now for years. Beware the unloved. They will eventually hurt themselves, or me. I won't be spliced any longer. I need to align.
What power do books hold over us?
Books awaken empathy. Books help us navigate the painful experiences in our lives, and it helps us find our way through the dark ocean so we can arrive at acceptance, closure, healing, and renewed and rebirthed strength.
What are the 3 books that have given you strength in life?
I love the memoir Wild by Cheryl Strayed. It was the book I was reading when I decided that I could and I would write my own memoir. Wild came to me as a 30th birthday present from my beloved sister-in-law. So because it came to me as a gift of love from someone I love so deeply, I was already bound to it in a deep way. And like any greatly timed book, like any great experience of a book, it was perfectly timed. It came into my life when I was grappling with the question that I feel so many of us, as we approach our 30s, we begin to ask ourselves is, how do I bridge the distance between my reality and my truth? Am I really living inside my purpose? Am I really using my time wisely on this planet to be of service to others? And I was grappling with all of these questions, and I was having so much internal turmoil with my state as an actress in this industry that I had stopped really believing in. And that's when I read Wild, and Cheryl's voice and her writing is so radically loving as well as boldly unapologetic. And prior to reading Wild, I had never encountered a narrator, a woman, who so unapologetically stood inside her full spectrum of self. Cheryl had a seemingly dichotomous life, in the sense that here she was, this brilliant thinker, a cerebral scholar, and a doting daughter. And at the same time, she had also gone through experiences of promiscuous sex and drug abuse, and she didn't make any apologies for it. And then there's also this, the book is a tribute to the love she felt for her mother, and also her coming to terms with the loss of her mother to cancer at a very young age. And there is this section where there's a howling lament of the rage she feels against her mother for leaving and dying so young. And which is actually one of the most accurate tributes of love and grief, because we all know that anger, this, yes, it is unfair, but it's also so fair. This rage we feel against life when life takes away the people we love in an altogether unjust way. And I was so moved by that book for so many reasons. And the biggest thing being, it gave me permission to sit down and embrace and then write my full self without making any apologies for the things I have done and the things I have experienced in life. So 2 other books. Yeah. The other one is The Chronology of Water by Lydia Yuknovich. And that's it's a memoir by Lydia. And chronology has, it completely defies traditional structure and the traditional, mythology of how, good books should be written. And I love that because obviously, Lydia breaks that myth and does it so successfully, because it is an incredible book that is loved by so many, and it's so effective. The breaking of the structure, the traditional structure, is in and of itself hugely important to the story she is telling. It's so intelligent the way she breaks and challenges traditional structure. And the biggest gift she gave me as a writer is she validated the rage that I had felt toward the injustices I had experienced and had been witness to in the lives of the women and girls around me. See, when I sat down to write I Am Yours I sat down to write it on November 28, 2013. So I sat down to write I Am Yours on November 28, 2013, 8 days after my 30th birthday. And one of the first things that completely shocked me was the volume of anger that I had pent inside me that was throbbing underneath the surface. And because I was a dutiful, polite daughter and woman, I had never ever expressed that rage. And anytime I came close to expressing any sort of indignation, I was punished. I was severely punished by those around me, because how dare I speak about those things? And reading Lydia's work gave me validation and insight into female rage, because women, by and large, we are raised to be nurturers. Therefore, we are raised to be very aware and protective of the collective well-being of the community, the society, the family, the relationship. Therefore, whenever we do feel rage, it's a signal that injustice has been committed, which is also to say, our rage is not shameful. It is actually very honorable. It is actually very practical. It is actually very fair and correct to feel rage in the face of injustice. And from there on, I have never felt ashamed or apologetic about the feelings of anger I have felt and continue to feel against a society that continues to disrespect and degrade girls and women, or any marginalized person. It is good. Our rage is a signal that we know the truth that is trying to be kept hidden from us. And the third book that really made such an impression in my life is Paula by Isabel Allende. I started reading Isabel Allende as a teenage girl, and She's a magical realist author, and I have always loved magical realism because, and I've always loved Isabel's writing because her characters, and the experiences they went through, they were the closest I had ever come across in any book that resembled the experiences of my family, the experiences in my culture, and the experiences I went through. And it is not an accident that so many magical realist authors come from war-torn countries that have corrupt governments and rampant poverty and systemic injustice and racism from years of white colonialism. Magical realism, I believe our brains invent things like magical realism, things like fantastical and poetic language and architecture, literary architecture, because beauty helps soften the cruelties of life. Beauty helps soften the cruelties of life. And the brain and the human spirit, we need beauty, and that's why we seek and create beauty in the form of art. We seek beauty in nature, in relationships, in love, in family, in science, in faith, in spirituality. Beauty helps us stay inside of a narrative so that we can make it over to the other side to arrive to closure, release, and courage. And Paula taught me that as an author, that beauty is necessary to keep a narrative going. And beauty she also taught me that beauty is in and of itself a healing balm for the writer as well as for the reader.
What aspects of our society do you think are, they're normal, they're accepted right now, but a generation or two from now, they're just going to seem odd, strange, even grotesque? And as reference, you can go back to the 1980s.
Right.
There were all these teen dramas, teen comedies that were very rapey.
Yes.
Extremely rapey.
Yes.
And you watch them now.
The normalization of rape culture, the normalization of misogyny.
Right. But look forward 20, 30 years from now.
Right.
What seems normal or acceptable right now that you think a generation or so will just seem completely batshit crazy?
Right. Well, I know that he doesn't seem normal to us, to you and I, but you know who I'm going to say.
I know where you're going with this.
But there is half of society who do believe, who have normalized him. And my hope is that the work we are doing now to unpack and dismantle the normalization of Trump, my hope and my goal is that 20 years from now, a person like him, the actions and verbiage and things he has done will feel radically abnormal. That is my hope and my goal. Any kind of racism, any kind of sexism, I'm hoping that's going to feel completely, any kind of prejudice, marginalization of immigrants, marginalization of any person, I'm hoping that will become absolutely obtuse. Because it is.
Who are your heroes? And by that I don't mean who are the people you admire. What I mean is the people who, they give you guidance.
Right.
They give you direction. You look at what they've achieved and you basically say to yourself, I want to be there too.
Oprah, Obama, Michelle Obama, Maya Angelou, my mother. And I'm always cognizant of the woman I'm aspiring to become, to be the woman 5 years from now. And, making sure that every day I am living the acts of service that I feel indebted to. It feels like a responsibility. Now that I've reclaimed my voice, it feels like it is my duty to use it positively, to use it continuously, to use it without fear. Yeah.
It's one of my favorite questions to ask people.
Yeah, it's a great question. All my parents, I'm lucky to have my mom, my stepdad, my father, all of them. They have survived incredible heartbreak and trauma. My father and my mother, they grew up while there was a war going on in Bangladesh for independence, and I have such profound respect for them both. And not only that they survived, but then they fought to create a beautiful life for their children, and then they have thrived beyond it too.
What's something that you believe to be absolutely true that the vast majority of people think is absolutely crazy?
A lot of people I've heard a lot of people ask me if I'm afraid of speaking truth to power, if I'm afraid of, sharing my life experiences so openly. For me, it's actually silence feels terrifying, because silence is rarely a choice. It certainly has never been in my life. And anytime I have been silent, it's because I have been silenced under threat of danger or under reality of danger. So for me to speak into a microphone on stage, to speak my truth into a book, to publish the things I want to say, it is the absolute opposite of fear that I feel. I feel complete peace, actually. And I think for many people, they guess it would be the opposite feeling.
If listeners want to connect with you, social media, website, where should they go?
I'm Reema Zaman on every single handle, Instagram.
At Reema Zaman.
At Reema Zaman is, I'm easy to find.
How easy is your book to find?
It's very easy.
How?
It's Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Powell's, your local bookshop, your local indie bookstore, your local library. I Am Yours by Reema Zaman. Yeah. That's the only combination out there.
Absolutely perfect.
Thank
you so much for this conversation.
Thank you so much, Matt.
We will be repeating it in about 2 or 3 months.
Yes, to see where we are, where we have gone from today. It's a big day.
It is a big day.
It's a big day. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.